welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. And we will start by lighting the chalice. And how about another helpful person from that family? Tempe's mother. Inheritors of our ancestors' legacy, we hold their stories tenderly, gleaning wisdom from diverse journeys, united in hope for the future. Guide us to trust and love as we kindle this flame together. Okay, sometimes we've been getting a little carried away with the mingling and chitter chat. So that's great. It's wonderful, but we want to be able to get started earlier today, so let's not get too carried away. Okay? So good. Meet each other, read each other. Yeah, well, you don't have to just sit there share with us that's a joy or a concern. We take a rock out of that little dish and drop it in, tell us what it is and drop it in the water. I'm going to start. Allison let us know yesterday she wouldn't be here today because her mother had a stroke. And so this is a concern for Lida and for Allison and her family.
Joy for my friends, Maureen and Richard, whose daughter Marion is home for a visit from Ireland.
I learned a new calculus rule that enabled me to solve a certain other complex problem.
Joy or concern?
I had a couple of joys. One is yesterday, despite the inclement weather and falling temperatures, there were more than 100 citizens out on Main Street demonstrating their citizen action. And it was great. And second of all, we went to a fundraiser last night at Peters for the band shell, the band shell in River Falls, and it's a joy to live in this community where there was such an active art and musician thing, and the people like Tommy Jones and Chris Silver leading the way, and just amazing asset for our community.
Anyone else there?
Hi, here's a small joy for the community. I brought in some honey, so 6 jars, and we don't have a price tag on them. It's just if you can donate, please do. Bees work very hard to get this one.
I'm gonna stay in my seat, but someone else is around. My joy is related. My 4-year-old every day has been saying, I need to know a lot about bees. And looking at my very large bee book, which is way beyond his understanding, but he's like picking it up. So pretty soon he's gonna know a lot about bees.
Good. Great. Anyone else? I'll put this big rock in for all our unexpressed joys and concerns. Okay. Our speaker is Eileen Korenic. She is a professor at, or she was a professor, she's retired now, right? At UWRF. And I just found this on the UWRF faculty. She taught astronomy, general physics, optics, science of light, science teaching techniques. She's interested in optics, liquid crystals, colorimetry, public science, outreach, and the planetarium. And she is a talented actor as well. I've seen her in Shirley Valentine, and then there was one postcards or letters, yeah, postcards. Remember the performance better than I remember the name of the play. She's just that great. And it's so useful for me to know her because sometimes I want to write a poem and I don't understand what I want to write about. And so I ask her because I don't know about the moon. Like, why don't we ever see the other side of the moon? It's because the moon completes one full rotation on its axis in the time it takes to orbit the Earth. I had to remind myself of that. And so I think of it as kind of like if you were trying to hide something, and you would just keep moving as the person you're trying to hide it from is going around you, kind of like that. And then that made me think the Earth is always turning away from the moon. So it sees us in reverse. And so I wrote this poem because Eileen helped me. It's called Love Eludes the Moon. The little boat drags a cape of wake across the cove, makes the watery, reflected moon nod like a bobblehead, while the real moon hangs his bony face above the trees, taking one last look at the lake before Earth turns, shrugs a forested shoulder, and he gazes now on the road down which the boat rode on its trailer, the old man hauling it in darkness to the launch, having left his house, locking the door carefully behind him. his wife sleeping upstairs in their bed where she slid into the warm scent of his space when he rose. While the old man trolls for walleye, Earth keeps turning away, showing now the park where the man and woman watched their children play on summer evenings, the street where they walked in moonlight after the movie, now the bar where they met. And here is the school they both attended but did not know each other, even by sight. The moon, cratered with losses, wants only that, a story in which there is another, someone other than Earth, to cup in curved darkness the broad dents of his clobbered heart. He does not see the moon's catch. He does not see the man's catch. 3 good fish. The man turning in from the lake in new light, imagining how she will exclaim over their beauty, how the kitchen will smell when she fries them for their dinner, how they will linger at table under the moon's thinner face. So now Eileen is going to talk to us about the cathedrals on the, how do you say, the Camino? On the Camino. I'm so happy that she would do this for us.
Thank you. Thanks for the poem.
You're welcome.
I'm so flattered that Maureen gave me some credit for her poem. I have no talent in that regard. So thank you for including me on that. One of the things that you said in your poem was that the moon was wishing for something else, some companion, someone else. Have any of you been hearing about the moon? Something actually did land there? The firefly? You've all heard that? For the first landing that was a successful landing since 1972. Sending pictures back of the Earth. Earthrise, so some really spectacular pictures. What a lot of people do not know, and I'll just, this has nothing to do with my talk, but it's like, this is what people in physics take as funny. The company that launched this was a company called Firefly. And I thought, why would they name it that? And it turns out Firefly, and Don was just telling me, some of you have on your name tags a dragonfly. And the symbolism was that the dragonfly starts out as a little grub and metamorphoses into a dragonfly, something beautiful. Well, it turns out the people at the Firefly company thought of their program in the same way. It starts out as a little nothing, a little firefly, and it eventually metamorphoses into a firefly and brings light in the darkness. It's like, that's not the funny part. So that's the name of their company. They wanted to send something to the moon, and they decided they were going to name their first spacecraft, the one that's going to land on the moon, Blue Ghost. Blue Ghost is the name of a fairly rare firefly. I did not know this, I had to look it up. Why would they call it that? And apparently it glows blue instead of the usual white of a firefly. And it's fairly rare, found in the southeastern United States. Still not the funny part. Okay, so it landed successfully on the moon, and they landed it on a specific place they were going for, a place called Mons Taille, T-R-E-I-L-L-E. Jacques Taille was a very famous, lived in the 1700s, a very famous entomologist. Who knows what an entomologist is? Anybody want to say? Insects. The firefly, specializing in the ghost rider, landed on a space named for a study hall. That's the funny part. If I gotta tell you it's funny, I guess it ain't that funny. But nevertheless, that's what physics people find funny. And I've said this before, most astronomers don't think this is funny, but you know what? Astronomers do come up with funny stuff because they have nothing to do until it gets dark. So my talk today is called The Physics of Cathedrals, Stained Glass, and Charlie Sheen's Family. And I'm hoping that that title was enough to make you go, whoa! One of the classes that I used to teach at the university was, Maureen did not list, and I probably haven't updated it on my bio there, as I taught a course called Science and Art. And one of the things that you have to have at a university, at least here, you have to have a science credit in order to graduate. You don't have a science credit, you just keep taking science over and over until by golly you got it. And kids were so afraid. I was teaching astronomy. Kids were afraid to take astronomy. They were afraid of anything that sounded too mathy. So I put this course together called Science and Art, where I looked through history, and I found, luckily there are 14 weeks in the semester, and I found 12 parallel examples throughout history where science and art went through exactly the same changes at exactly the same time. And this particular talk comes from one of those parallels. The parallel of the physics associated with the architecture of cathedrals is in parallel with the art associated with stained glass windows. What does that have to do with Charlie Sheen? Does anybody even remember Charlie Sheen? Okay, he used to be in a show called the 2.5 Men. Okay, which was, it was kind of a cute show. Charlie Sheen himself was kind of a wild guy. You know, tiger blood, and injecting himself with all kinds of crazy stuff. He was wild, just a wild guy. And I thought, what a strange connection he would have to cathedrals, stained glass, Charlie Sheen. So I went looking into this, and we're going to go way back, starting out with the Emperor Constantine. So next, please. Is that Anne up there? Okay, thank you. And so we're looking here. This is the Emperor Constantine. I'm sure you all recognize him. Hi, you know. And that's his mother, Helena, who's later named a saint by the Christian Church. Around the year 300, Emperor Constantine, this is now 300 AD, what used to be called, or we used to call it AD, we now call it CE. That's the more preferred term, so it's not associated with God anymore. It's supposed to be associated with culture change. But so around the year 300, this is now 300 years after Christ, 300 years after Christianity had started. And in those 300 years, there was already a whole bunch of people who were just disagreeing about stuff. They could not decide, was Jesus really God, or was he just a good person? Or how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? I say 20. I say infinite. There were factions all over the Roman Empire about people who could not decide any facts about Christianity. And 300 years later, anybody who knew Jesus, or knew someone who knew Jesus, or knew someone who used to know Jesus, but generation, all of those people were gone. There's nobody who could answer those questions anymore. And so Constantine was tired of all of the squabbling. He himself came to believe in Christianity for the basest of reasons. He had a dream one night of a cross, and he believed if he painted a cross on all of the shields in his army, he would win the war the next day. And he did. And so he converted to Christianity for that reason. Not because he thought Jesus was the Christ, but that's reason enough. Jesus helped me win the war. By golly, we're being Christian. But he was very tolerant, but he said he was tired of all of the squabbling, tired of the squabbling throughout the Roman Empire. So he decided he was going to send people out. And the Roman Empire, whether you believe in big government or not, the Roman Empire was very well organized. They got things done. They could charge taxes, and most of the people were happy to pay those taxes because they got something for them. They got good roads, good infrastructure. There was a trained army defending every border. So people who were, they had been taken over by the Romans, but they were never going to be taken over by anybody else again, because Roman soldiers were protecting them. And being a Roman citizen was really not a bad deal. You only had to have 3 rules that you had to follow. You had to pay taxes, well duh. People were mostly happy to do that. You had to praise the Roman emperor as a god. And that was not too difficult for most people, because they all had multiple gods. They could keep their own gods, just add Caesar in as one more. Add the ruler in as one more. Okay. And don't cause any trouble. Okay? Obviously, the Israelites failed on all 3. They were always causing trouble. And so sending somebody to Judea was considered the crap job in the Roman Empire. Anybody who ended up in Judea was, that was horrible. But this hadn't happened quite yet. This had happened much earlier. So Constantine was now trying to turn the whole Roman Empire into at least the same belief in Christianity to stop the squabbling. So he took his well-trained army and he told them, you go out and you find me. Where was Jesus buried? Where was Jesus born? You find me the stable. You find me the crypt. You find me the cross on which Jesus was crucified. And they went out, and would you believe it? 300 years later, they came back and they said, Emperor, we found it. We found where Jesus was buried. We found the cross. His mother, in fact, found the cross. That's when she was made into a saint. They found that where Jesus was born. Found God. Do you think they found it? Who's going to come back and tell the emperor, goofed, couldn't find it, sorry? Of course they found it. Whether they found it or not, of course they found it. And so at the one site, next one please, Anne. At the one site, they found near Jerusalem, the place where they believed that Jesus was buried. And Constantine, at each one of these holy places where they were finding something, he said, we will build a church there. And so in Jerusalem, there is this church. This is the one, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, is believed to be, or at least according to Constantine's soldiers, believed to be the place where Jesus was initially buried, and then rose from there 3 days later. So that became, of course, a holy site, along with lots of other holy sites, where Constantine's soldiers had found, places to go to. So people would travel from all over Europe. They would make a pilgrimage. Do you all know what a pilgrimage is? It's not just a trip, it's not just a vacation, it has a holy purpose. Okay? So people were making pilgrimages from all over to see where was Jesus buried, where was Jesus born. People were traveling from everywhere. But think of the timing of this. That was 300. 300 years later than that, around 600 or so, the prophet Muhammad came on the scene. And he too made Jerusalem a very special place. He is believed, according to Muslim tradition, he is believed to have risen into heaven from a special rock in Jerusalem. They had built a mosque there called the Dome of the Rock. That's the more famous image, with the gold dome on it. So, typically, the Muslims were now coming in, claiming Jerusalem as their city. And so it became quite dangerous for people, especially Christian pilgrims, to come from around Europe, travel south towards what we now consider the Mideast, to come into Jerusalem. It was just too dangerous to go there. So people thought, where else can we go? Is there any place else that's as holy? If we can't get to Jerusalem, where else is there? And so there were some other places you could travel to Rome. What was there was, of course, eventually St. Peter's Basilica. That came, almost 500 years later. But Peter was believed to be buried there, so Peter's bones, St. Peter's bones. But where else? Where else is there to go? Well, it turned out, right around about this time, we're talking about around the year 800, 900 AD or CE, it turns out there was a story that cropped up in Spain. And could you go to the next one, please? At the city in Compostela, which is just about over there. This is a strange little map. It's actually a little bit closer to the Atlantic Ocean. It turns out there was a story that occurred in the city of Compostela, Spain. A bride and groom were coming out of their wedding. Came out, and the wedding was being held in a very small church that was right on the coastline. And they saw this boat knocking against the rocks on the shore. And the bridegroom ran over. Bridegroom? Stick with the bride. No. He went over to see what was going on, what was the noise. And he looked in and he saw that there was a boat there. And in this boat, he immediately recognized the headless body of James, the Bishop of Jerusalem. Recognized him without a head. Okay, it's getting a little apocryphal, but that's a lot of how these stories go. He immediately recognized it as James, the martyred Saint James. It eventually became Saint James. The martyred Saint James. The bridegroom jumped into the boat, trying to rescue the body of the saint. And with two of them in the boat started to go down. And because this was a holy person trying to be saved by someone who's trying to do a good deed, the scallops of the ocean came up. You know what scallops are? Bivalves? Okay. The scallops came up, lifted the boat safely onto the shore, saved St. James's body and the bridegroom. And so, of course, word of this story spread. This was indeed a miracle worthy of building a church there. And so, of course, they built a magnificent cathedral and named it for St. James. I think if we go to the next one, please, Anne. Can we go back? I think I have one that says Compostela, Spain. Maybe I don't. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, maybe I left that out. So they named it St. James. St. James in Spanish is Santiago. We have a city like that, don't we? St. James over in California, San Diego.
Oh, yeah.
So that's where the name came from. So the church was then named for Santiago, St. James. He built a beautiful cathedral there. And because word of this miracle spread, it became like, well, that's the miracle, the place we can go for a pilgrimage. We don't have to go to Jerusalem anymore. We can travel the north of Spain. And we're not going to be attacked by Muslims because we're Christian. We can now go someplace. And of course, people wanted to travel from lots and lots of different places. So there were some sort of official starting places. And if we go to the next one, please. So there you can see all of the places that they started from. The one that is sort of in green there, the path that's in green, starts in Paris. The path that starts in red starts in Vézelay. I thought, how is that marker moving? I'm not moving anything. So one starts in Vézelay. I did bring the pointer here because I know where it is. So there's Vézelay, one that started in Puy, and one that started in Arles. So you could start at any one of those places. And you can kind of sort of tell where they all finally come together is at the Pyrenees. And if you go to the next one. So right at the Pyrenees, they finally all come together and they finally meet at Compostela. And so those became the new pilgrimage routes. The whole trip from any one of those 4 starting places and ending up in Compostela came to be known as the Way. That was the name of Christianity before it was called Christianity. You want to find your way to God. Remember what Jesus said? I'm not sure how religious this group is, so I'm not shoving religion down your throat. But the original name of Christianity was the Way, because one of the things that Jesus said is, I am the way. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the way. There were lots of religions that adopted that. Buddhism, Buddha said, you have to walk the road yourself. I'm the way. And you have to walk the road yourself. The word Taoism, T-A-O, Taoism means the water course way. So the idea of way, finding your way, making your way somewhere, was very prevalent. And of course, in Spanish, the word for way is Camino. And so this became known as the Santiago de Compostela Camino. You can get to the cathedral by traveling this particular road to get there. This was the path of how to get to Compostela. So if you go to the next one, please. So when you take a look at this is a highly stylized map of this. But take a look at how these are. 4 official starting places. There are other places that you could start. But basically, if you're going to travel with a group of pilgrims, you would meet at one of these 4 starting places. 4 separate places that ultimately met together at the Pyrenees and then traveled all the way to Santiago. So you can still travel that way now. And some of you were telling me you were thinking about maybe making that trip. I had a student who actually did make the trip. She's very religious. And that's what people do. Typically when they go to walk the Camino, they want to walk it because they want to use it as a pilgrimage. They use it as a time to meditate. It's very contemplative. There's no one policing why you go. There's no one forcing you to be contemplative or even to be religious. If you are the sort of person who thinks that might be fun, what the hell, let's walk the Camino. Yeah, you can do that. Nobody's going to stop you. You can listen to tunes if you want to the whole time you're walking. Nobody's going to stop you. Nothing is being policed. But this is also a place that is not very scenic. Well, I guess and that's very subjective, of course. but there are no waterfalls. There are no beautiful mountains. Climbing over the Pyrenees is said to be the most difficult, arduous part of the trip. It is not fun. Be prepared. Bring several pairs of shoes. You know, it's meant to be, you think about yourself. But the people there are so proud of this. The people who live along the Camino are so proud. They don't want people to get lost or to have a bad experience. So all along the way, they have marked the path so that you don't get lost. And next one, please. And this is how they have the path marked. There are various kinds of scallop symbols all along the way. And now you know the story of the scallops. You know why they're using scallops. Anne, could you go back like maybe two of them, backwards, two? Maybe one more. Do you see how all of these are like the ribs of a scallop? The ribs come together, finally all joining as one. So there's yet another reason for making use of scallops as a symbol. Can you go forward now to the markers? Thank you. So those are along the way. What they were finding over the years of people walking along the Camino is that people who were walking this specifically because they did want to get in touch with God, they wanted to think about their lives, they wanted to reevaluate their relationship with a God or what they believed was the true God. They found that people would be walking, but they weren't looking, and they missed the signs. What people were told, if you're going to walk the Camino, the instructions that they're given from any starting place that they cared to start at, they were told, if you get lost, stop walking. Sit down. Someone will come. The people along the Camino are so proud of being associated with it that they come, and if they see that you're lost, they will come to you, and in whatever language it is that you need to hear, and they have a card that has different languages on it, they will come up to you, and they will say, can I help you find the way again? Does that not sound like an angel? You know, I mean, I just kind of get shivered. It's not like, hey, you lost? Get up, keep going. Where's your GPS on your phone? It's not like that. It's, can I help you? Can I help you find the way? As if there's only one. You know, I think there's something quite tiring about it. So people walk the Camino, but because they are very protective of it, you are not supposed to bike along the Camino unless you have booked through a special tour company, and then you have a separate path. People who are walking do not want to be disturbed by someone who is cycling. You can cycle, but it's a separate path. If you are someone who needs a cane or you need a wheelchair, separate path. If you want to take a car, you can, yet another separate path. You are not to disturb the people who are walking the Camino because they want to meditate on God, on their own lives. So they're very, very protected. Well, it turns out in the 1990s or so, could you go to the next one, Anne, please? It turns out Charlie Sheen's family is a very peculiar connection to the Camino. Sheen is not the family name. Maybe some of you know that. The original Sheen actual last name is Estevez. Well, Charlie Sheen's, that's his stage name. Charlie Sheen's father is Martin Sheen. Some of you might know that name from The West Wing, for example, or Grace and Frankie with the Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda. So it turns out Martin Sheen is himself a very activist Catholic. When he's not making movies, he's out marching for human rights. He has been arrested a number of times because he is so fervent on human rights as part of his Catholicism. So that was his original last name, was Estevez. So Charlie Sheen is one of his sons. His other son is Emilio Estevez. You all know Emilio, maybe, from the Mighty Ducks movies? And Emilio, not quite so famous, but it turns out Emilio is also a filmmaker. He's not just an actor, he's a filmmaker. And so Emilio bought the rights to a book called The Way, written by a person who had actually traveled the Camino and wanted to describe some of the people that they found, or that they met on the way. They're sort of fictionalized. You know, he didn't want to divulge anyone's real story, so it's sort of fictionalized. But in one of the stories is a woman who just had an abortion. She doesn't know how to deal with her feelings about that. She's going to walk the Camino. Another man is a about to get married. He's not sure if he wants to. He's going to walk the Camino to figure it out. And so Emilio bought the rights to this, and he wanted to film a movie of this story. And he asked his father, Martin, to be in the movie. And the character that Martin Sheen plays is a man whose son, played by Emilio Estevez, his son is walking the Camino, and as he's crossing over the Pyrenees, he is struck by lightning and killed. And so Martin Sheen gets this call, your son is dead, he has been cremated, please come and pick up his ashes. And so Martin Sheen goes there, doesn't really believe in God, but he's got to go take care of this. He was upset with his son for walking the Camino at all. And so he gets there, what am I going to do with these ashes? And one of these other people on the Camino say, why don't you walk the Camino for him? Why don't you walk there and distribute his ashes as you go? And that would be like him walking the Camino. So Martin Sheen reluctantly agrees, okay, he will walk the Camino. And Emilio Estevez and Martin Sheen got permission from the bishops along the Camino, along all the paths, got permission to film the actual Camino itself. They were told you cannot include any pilgrims in your imagery unless you get permission from them first. You cannot let anyone see your equipment. You cannot let anyone see any of your vehicles. But yes, you can film. And it's believed that they got that permission because Martin Sheen himself was such a fervent Catholic. He was so, very respectful of this. So they did, in fact, get permission to film. And if you could go to the next one, please, Anne. So there they are, filming. The film is called The Way. It's a very indie film, but you can actually get it. I saw it when I found it in a red box in town here. So it's not that obscure. You can actually get it. We walk the pilgrimage route. And if you would go to the next one, please. So we got permission to film. And there you get a chance to see kind of what it looks like. This is not a place that you go to take a lot of pictures, really. You might. And there are tour companies that in fact say, scenic walking tour, scenic cycling tour. Not so much, not really so much. But so that's what you see. And when you get all the way to the end, if you make it all the way to Santiago de Compostela, next one please, Anne. There's the church on the outside. There's the church on the inside. And it turned out so many people were doing this, and so many people were making this walk really to change their lives, to examine themselves. But they would get to their destination, and they were so overcome by their emotions, they would just fall down in the square and just start weeping. They were so overcome by this that finally the bishops who were operating, in charge of the whole Camino, they finally brought in counselors, lay and clergy counselors, so that people could come and talk about what happened to them, what happened, how they changed, how everything is different now. And so you can, in fact, actually walk the Camino. If you are doing it for religious reasons, there will be people at the other end who can help you deal with whatever emotions you have. And if you could go back, please, Anne, this is going back almost to like maybe the fourth one or something like that, leading to Santiago. Can you all see those dots on here? You can see the dots? Every place that there's a dot, people were, of course, making these walks. If you walk from Paris, which is the longest trip, from Paris all the way to Compostela, it's 900 miles. And if you walk, and they estimate, and the average person, if you're walking and you're healthy, you can do about 15 miles a day. If you stop and do some sightseeing, such as it is, there are some places to see along the way, it takes you something like 6 weeks. If you're just walking, you can do it in 4 weeks. If you want to walk it and you don't have that much time, you can have the tour companies will drop you off, closer and closer to the end point. And if you want to get credit, I guess you could call it that, if you want to get credit in your passport, which is their passport, it's not your real passport. If you want credit that you actually walk the Camino, you have to walk the last 60 miles. So you must do that. If you start, say, in Spain, at the Pyrenees, that's 490 miles. That's still a lot of walking. What they estimate, though, is that if people could walk 15 miles a day, of course they measure in kilometers, people could walk 15 miles a day, even back in the 800s, 900s, years when this was being, started, they had to stop. About at the end of every day, they had to stop for camping, for resting. And, the Christian church was not stupid about this. You got a lot of people. At the end of 10 miles or at the end of 15 miles, they need a place to stay. The Catholic Church, the Christian church, started building places for them to stay. They built what we now would call hostels. They still exist as hostels. They're bunk beds. You help with the cleanup, you help with the cooking. But they also provided spiritual comfort for these people. And they thought, if we're going to provide spiritual comfort, let's build a church. So at every one of those places where you see a dot, there is a church built there. And not just a church, a cathedral, a big cathedral. Because part of the draw of coming to any of these places is, why would you stop at this one and not push on a little farther to the next one? You want to go to one that's got something for you. So they would have very, very nice cathedrals. Every one of those cathedrals contained a relic area. If you had a piece of the true cross, that was good. If you had a piece of the cloth that touched Jesus, that was good. And the higher the class of relic that you had, the more likely someone would be, pilgrims would be, to stop at your particular cathedral. So there was all kinds of competition. You wanted to get the best class of relic that you could. The best class relic is to always have something from the holy person. Have a piece of their hair, their fingernail, their bone. People took this so seriously in some places. In St. Catherine of Siena, Siena of course is in Italy, not along the Camino. In St. Catherine of Siena, such a holy person in her life, when she died, they cut off her head, encased it in wax, and it is now stored in a temperature and humidity controlled box so that you can come and see this top first class relic. So all along the way, they would have as many relics as they could possibly get. With cathedrals built all along the way. But of course, if you're going to build a cathedral, and think of when this is. This is 900 AD, 1000 AD. This is the Dark Ages. When the Roman Empire fell in 476, that was the end of defense of the borders. That was the end of the government taking care of roads, taking care of you, getting food from one end of the empire to the other. Every little town was now on their own. And that meant nobody had time to do art. Nobody had time to discover science. It was all about survival. And that's why it's called the Dark Ages. There was no development of art or science for 1,000 years. And now suddenly, they want to start building cathedrals, and nobody could remember how. How did we do that? Nobody left any instructions. There were never any, really, except one Roman guy, back in like 40 BC, actually wrote a book on how to build stuff. Nobody knew how do we go about building things. And so they thought, well, let's go back to the last time anybody knew something. Let's go back to the last time the Romans were building stuff. The Romans knew how to build stuff. So if you would go forward, please, Anne. There, that's it. This particular image came from, this is the one, Patrice's brother Rich actually walked the Camino. And then this is a pair of the pictures that he sent.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll notice what the shape of the windows are. Okay? Shape of the inside of the, everything, half-circle domes. Next slide, please. That's, can you go forward, please? Next one. There we go. That's what the Romans knew how to do. The Romans knew how to build arches. How can you support a lot of weight with not a lot of material? Arches. And that's why they have so many clever aqueducts that could bring water from the Apennines, right down the center of Italy, out to the coasts for millions of people pretty efficiently. And so that became the style. Let's actually build something that the Romans knew how to do. We can do that too. We know how to build arches. Next one, please. And so every place that you see a half-circle arch has come to be called Romanesque, because that's how the Romans did it, half-circle arches supported a lot of weight. I think I have one more maybe. And so that style came to be used at pretty much a lot of cathedrals, not necessarily along the Camino. But every one of those dots that you see in that, on the map image, every dot has a Romanesque cathedral, because that's what they finally figured out how to build. So half circle arches on the inside, half circle windows on the outside. They found out, though, that that was not such a grand idea. And if you could go to the next one, please. This is where the science in my science and art class comes in. If you actually do an analysis of where are the forces when you have a half circle arch, and I won't trouble you all of that. But if you have a half circle arch like this, pick just any one stone, that's what we do in physics. Pick one stone to simplify it and analyze the forces. Next one, please. And you analyze, there's forces from the rocks, or from the blocks pushing below, or blocks pushing above. And in order to have a stable arch, you gotta have all the sideways forces balance each other out, or the whole thing falls sideways. You gotta have all the up and down forces balancing, or the whole thing falls or floats away, like that's gonna happen. But you know, you gotta have all the forces balanced. Next one, please. The only way they could figure out, and the only place that there was not a nice balanced force, was right here at the base. Every place else, forces were balanced except at the base. And that, the forces were pushing out, and all the walls were collapsing. So they figured out, gotta shore those up somehow, and you shore things up by using a support called a buttress. College kids think that's a hilarious word. And the first way, it was absolutely as crude as you can get. Piling up sand, stone, dirt, anything. Clasping buttresses that just hugged the side of the building. That's all that they did. They looked ugly, but they kept the walls from collapsing. Next one, please. And so they started to try to make them look a little better, making these clasping buttresses actually have some sort of shape. So they attached them to the sides of the building. But still, people really did not like them. They thought they looked quite ugly. Next one. This one you can see Romanesque. You should already trigger a knee-jerk reaction. You see a half-circle arch, Romanesque. So there's the Roman style. These are the clasping buttresses. So you know that inside, on the other side of those, there is some sort of arch. It's holding up the roof, some sort of half-circle arch. People hated the way these look. They didn't look artistic at all. I think I have one more from the inside, please, Anne. There, once again, this is inside of Santiago itself. You can see half-circle arches everywhere. Wherever there's some kind of opening, half-circle. And think about that. If you want to have a half-circle arch, you got to have pretty teeny tiny windows, because the glass is not going to support all that mass. So you're already forced to have little windows. Next one, please. So on the inside of the churches, it was dark and it was heavy. And on the outside of the churches, this is what you saw before you walked in. There's Jesus sitting in judgment on the souls that have died, the souls that are still living. And Jesus is deciding who goes to heaven, there's an angel, and who goes into the mouth of hell. Can you imagine going to church, and that's the image that you see before you go in? It's like that. The mouth of hell is waiting for me. And I get inside, and there's almost no light, and it's heavy walls. So not terribly uplifting, literally, or inspiring. Next slide, please. There's the mouth of hell. I wouldn't want to be one of them. You know, that really scares you into being good, doesn't it? Next one. And so you can see just how heavy, how weighty it is, and how very dark it is. Next, please. So these were all the characteristics of a Romanesque church. Round arches, thick walls, clasping buttresses, big towers, again, very heavy stuff. Chapels radiating out. If any of you have been to the St. Paul Church, it's considered partially Romanesque, because they do have these chapels coming out from the main dome. And the emphasis is on very somber, very earthbound. Next one, please. So as you can imagine, people were not so happy with that sort of imagery. They wanted to think about heaven as being a happy place, and people were not ready to do that yet. They were not able to figure it out. How do you get more light inside of the church? And so one way to do that, just draw this out here, if everybody can see this. Can you all see those two parallel lines? Okay. If that's, say, the size of the window that you want in your church, okay, you had to go small, it was going to be Romanesque. If you want a bigger window, they needed something else. They needed some other way being able to make the windows bigger. And still, this is still the Dark Ages. The Renaissance didn't start until the mid-1400s. So around 1200, how do we support something that's going to give us more light, but we can't have arches? That's not going to work. Who knows how to do that? They went all the way back to Euclid. Do you all remember our friend Euclid from 6th grade geometry? Euclid. You all remember Euclid and the okay? So let me show you. I'm not sure if I can do this in the air. I'll probably have to do it on the ground. What Euclid did, and he did this entirely as an exercise. He had no practical bent for anything. Euclid wrote 13 books that were all, you think we can solve this? Let's try it. We could solve it. Who cares? You know, it was nothing useful. Euclid wrote nothing useful. It was all of it to prove that human beings could think things out. So what Euclid experimented with was taking this, okay, just like that, making the radius, the width of the window. Can you all now see that? Okay, and that's the choice that they went with, because Euclid knew how to do that. And it turns out if you don't have a half circle arch, if you analyze the forces once again, and an arch that has a point at the top, you only have to support it in one place. You don't have to support it all the way up. Next one, please. So you only support where you need to support. And that means you get lots of space, don't have to use nearly so much material, and you can see lots of sky coming through there. They're not against the building anymore. Now they're called flying buttresses, because there's so much sky there. Next one. And you could, in fact, pile them up if you wanted to. Now it turns out that the cathedral at Notre Dame in Paris was being built just around the transition time. So if you come to the front of Notre Dame, they do have half-circle windows, they have half-circle arches, but they do have this pointy, it's called an ogive. You have these pointy ogives built out of the stone. So it's that, but with a half circle on the front of the church. If you go around to the back side, they have finally progressed to actually building flying buttresses and the ogive, the pointy-shaped arches. Paris is so proud of their flying buttresses, probably one of the first ever built to have flying buttresses. They have built, you all know Paris, Notre Dame is on an island in the middle of the Seine River, Ile de la Cité, middle of the Seine. They have built a bridge specifically so that tourists can stand on the bridge, it's about over here, and stand on the bridge and look at those lovely flying buttresses. Merci, Paris! You know, of course. They did that specifically so that you could look at it. But as soon as you now have bigger windows, and I think I have one more picture. Could you go to the next one, please? So there you can see a little material that they use. They kind of sort of do look like wings, kind of sort of, but you can see lots of sky. If you go to the next one, please. Now when you have this much space, you can do more with the light. It turns out, though, that the Italian writers of the time saw these flying buttresses, and they thought, that is so ugly. Those are so ugly. Okay, history test, pop history test. Who caused the Roman Empire to fall? Who invaded them? The Goths, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths. All of them barbarians. And so these Italian writers, saw these. This is clearly designed by Goths, barbarians. And that's how this style came to be known as Gothic. have not been able to figure out how Gothic, meant in this ugly way, is now transformed into modern day black fingernails and black lipstick. I don't know where that connection comes from. But as soon as you now have pointed arches, you can have bigger windows. You have flying buttresses, you can let more light in. If you let more light in, what are you going to do with that light? Next one, please. So there you can see Westminster Abbey, pointed arches, clearly Gothic. And some of you may actually have seen this because it shows up in a lot of places. I think I have this. Some years ago, there was a movie called The King's Speech. Any of you remember that? Okay. And it was the Queen Elizabeth II's father, who he was not destined to be king, but his brother abdicated to marry the American. I know all the dirt on the royals, I mean, come on. So he abdicated. So George VI became king. He did not expect to be. He had a terrible stutter. And so he hired someone to help him learn how to speak correctly so he could inspire the nation during World War I. So that's the story of the King's Speech. And of course, the king was played by, pardon me, Colin Firth. I'm back. So the King's Speech, okay, was filmed. They claimed that he was prepared, in this film, they prepared Colin Firth as George VI to prepare to speak to the nation. He had a speech, I don't know, person to help him. I don't know what you would call that. Nowadays we would call him a linguist. But so here's Colin Firth again. And there Jeffrey Rush is the person teaching him. This was said to be filmed inside of Westminster Abbey, because that's where he was going to be giving the speech that he was going to practice inside of Westminster Abbey. Can you look at this picture? Is this filmed in Westminster Abbey? Westminster Abbey does have this choir region. They do have a chair. All of this is correct. Was this actually Westminster Abbey? And can you go backwards one?
Is the windows too small?
Almost. You're getting close. This is the outside. Can we go forward one more? I'm going forward one more. I think this is going to show up. The director of photography screwed up. They should have shifted their camera just a little bit because they caught the wrong window. What shape is that one? Romanesque. It's Romanesque. And Westminster Abbey is Gothic. Somebody screwed up. And you know, okay, I'm a movie person. I've been to the movies with Patrice. We sit through every last credit. We do not get up until every credit is done. So of course, I'm sitting through this. I thought, well, they didn't film it in Westminster Abbey. Where did they film it? And at the end of the movie, they thank all of the places that allowed them to film there. Next one, please, Anne. It was filmed in Ely, England, Ely Cathedral. And you can see, yeah, that's Romanesque. I don't remember if I did this with you, but I do this with my students. Do you see? Do you see the windows? Look at the windows! Which people absolutely love when I'm with them in the movies, and I do that. And now you can do that too. But now, of course, we've got these nice big windows, lots and lots of glass. What are you going to do with all that glass and all that light? And that's when we see the artists come in. Next one, please, Anne. Is there one after that? Oh, there we go. And that's exactly what artists did. You got a lot of glass, got a lot of light coming in, and they figured out how do you melt different metal salts into the glass so you can get what is called stained glass. It's not stained, you can't rub it off, it's melted right into the glass. And they figured out lots and lots of ways of making all kinds of pretty pictures. Some of them you see so-called rose windows that they look like they're actually petals being produced. Next one, please. This style spread around to Europe. Next one. So you're starting to see, and I think you're probably already recognizing, you want to poke somebody and say pointy windows too. Next one. Perhaps one of the most famous of all, the Chartres Cathedral. And okay, I'll just pass this along. I hope this doesn't offend anybody. The correct pronunciation is chart. And once again, that sends students into peals of laughter. I will leave that for you, because I did not get that. Somebody had to tell me, but that's the correct pronunciation. Next one, please. Oh, sorry, next. And maybe I don't have any more than that. I don't remember if I had a few more. Next one. There we go. So inside of Chartres Cathedral, you start to see these huge stained glass windows. Next one. And they're now telling stories, these windows. The windows are so big, they can actually tell Bible stories. And you had to know, as the person who couldn't read, you had to know, you read the story in England from the bottom up. So here is Jesse, the root of Jesse produced David, produced Solomon, finally produced Jesus. You had to know, read from the bottom up. Next one, please. And there you can see up close what it looked like, telling the story. Next. This one, so these are I chose some from the Chartres windows because they're so spectacular. Some of them include images that are religious. Some of them look like zodiac signs. They were not using them for telling the future. They were using those as a calendar. And when it was this part of the year, you were supposed to count your money. You were supposed to count up your possessions. Next one. Probably the most famous one of all, the Blue Virgin window. Every part of this window was intact, even after the bombing in World War II. Every part of it was intact, except for her face. It's the only piece that had to be replaced. No one, to this day, knows how to make the blue of the blue Chartres stained glass. And they will not allow any samples to be taken, because that will only disfigure the window. So, one of the mysteries of science. Next one, please. So you're telling these whole stories. There's quite a lot of story to be told there. Next. I just thought this was a pretty one. There's the rainbow for Noah. Somewhere at the top of the window, because you're reading from the flood up to the rainbow. Next. It shows that there's usually a little window to say who paid for it, of course. Next. Here's the St. James window. Of course there's going to be a St. James window because he's the one who started it all. Next. Some more people who paid for the windows for years in this case. Next one, please. And these came to be called a poor man's Bible because you could read the whole Bible without knowing how to read. All you had to do was look at the pictures in the stained glass windows. Next. So what started it all in the first place? I started this story out by talking about pilgrimages. Next one. It turned out people didn't want to walk all the way to Compostela anymore. That was too much. So inside of many of these churches, they built into the floor something called a labyrinth. This is the one that's in Chartres. For any of you who live in town here, they had built one out of stone over at St. Bridget's in stone in glass. And you can see these are sort of like mazes. If any of you have done those, you walk in, you're supposed to follow it along. You end up actually walking the whole thing until you finally end up in the center. And this is supposed to represent the path from birth to death, and then the rebirth, and you make your way back out again. Next one, please. This is the one in Chartres. That's how big it looks. So it's built right into the ground. Next. And you can see people walking. Some people, when they really want to get serious about this, actually do it on their knees. And if you do it on your knees, it takes 2 hours in and 2 hours out. So people usually say a couple of rosaries in and a couple of rosaries coming back out again. Next one. And so it's the physics that turns the clasping buttresses into flying buttresses, which allowed artists to create stained glass windows. So all of the cathedrals along the Camino de Compostela are Romanesque right now. But it was all filmed by the Sheen family for our benefit. So in fact it is all connected. Thank you for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'll stay for questions if anybody has see that? Can you find that, Anne, where it's Jesus in the center of the relief inside the family? I never thought to count the people. That's really, that's pretty far back towards the front. No, even farther, the stone image of Jesus and souls being sent to hell. There. That one. This is the one?
Yeah.
And you're saying there's more people here? On this side?
No, there's more people
More
on
people
that
going to
side.
hell? Gosh, I never thought to count.
Well, not exactly count, like, you can see how crowded it is.
And that in itself is a really good lesson, if that was intended. It was not until the 1300s that a fresco painter named Giotto decided to use a special painting technique where you had exactly the same number of people on the right side of the cross as on the left side of the cross. They did not think to do a balancing act until Giotto came along. So that was considered quite a innovation. So the fact that there's more going to hell was meant to be a little bit of a warning, I think. Look how easy it is to get to hell. So, good observation. Wow. Yes, sir.
I often associate on the Iberian Peninsula those rounded arches with Islamic architecture. Is there any influence of those on the Romanesque style?
I think the influence probably went in the other direction. Because think about this. If you have an arch that's built, a half circle arch, how difficult is it? Take that arch and rotate it by 180 degrees. What do you get? You get a hemispherical dome. Okay? And the Romans were real good at doing that. They knew how to build a hemispherical dome, and then you reinforce it, and you get what? The Pantheon. Michelangelo crawled all over the Pantheon, taking measures of it, so that he could design the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. So when the Muslims came along to do mosques, it turns out that is the most space-efficient feature that you can have. That's why Eskimos build igloos. You can use the least amount of material, and you can get the most amount of people into that space. Think of what was before that. The architecture before that, you wanted to get a lot of people into a space. You had something like an Egyptian temple. And you picture what an Egyptian temple, they're beautiful, but they're all held up by columns. And the columns are all painted. You can't get a whole lot of people in there. You want to stuff a lot of people into a mass space or into any kind of service space. You want something that's really open and something that supports itself like a dome. I would be very surprised if anyone in Islam actually said they were influenced by Roman architecture or by Christian architecture. I think it's much more likely that it's an argument of you don't need to use so much material.
So Moorish architecture is actually based on the Romans.
Well, that's basically what he was asking. Is it based off of it? I'd be very surprised if anyone owned up to saying, yeah, that's who we got it from. But it's just a fact of physics. You can build something self-supporting with very little material if it's a half circle arch. So it's a physics argument, I would say, more than a philosophical.
Same with pyramids all across the world. It's just a converting theory.
Well, if you've seen like the ziggurats that they have in is that Mexico, and then you see the pyramids, and the first pyramids that were built were step pyramids. That was the first question I asked. I toured that place, and I said, "Is there any connection? Is there any chance that people from Egypt, the idea of step pyramids, somehow transferred that to people, in the Yucatan?" And the Egyptian guy looked at me and he goes, "What do you think?" So I took that to mean, don't be so stupid. You want to go high, there are a limited number of ways to do that, and I think you're exactly right. It's that there's just not that many ways. If you want to build a certain structure, there's a limited way to do that.
In this churchyard here outside, we have 2 labyrinths.
Really?
And my dad did a stained glass piece. It's back there.
Oh,
It is a lot.
how cool. I'm going to have to see
And
that.
he was not made it for a Christian church, and they said, no way, in the 1930s. So we made it anyway, and then I got it, and we died.
What a nice remembrance, though.
Yeah, it is.
And a lot of times, even the people who walk the Camino are not necessarily religious.
No, because
You're
my
you're
third
going to work
cousin,
things out, your own personal stuff.
my third cousin did walk the trail, but she and her boyfriend are definitely not religious as far as I know. They might be spiritual, but I think they did it because they thought it was cool, and they heard about it from other kids.
And that's a good reason to go too, but I don't think it's the same thing as, walking along the ocean or something. Like there's not that much to
No.
see
Right,
scenically.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming. This was fun. Thanks for having me.